Hello, gang, and welcome back to the place to hear real stories and reports of the unexplained. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have 5 true stories of Bigfoot encounters to share with you. And as a special treat, story number 2 will be read by my dear, close friend and fellow YouTuber, Kitty, from Pinebox Mysteries. She's just awesome, and I always thought it would be cool to have her here on my channel. I'll be sure and leave a link to her YouTube, where she also reads true stories of the cryptid and unknown variety, down in the pinned comment. Well, enough of my rambling. Now let's ride to Bigfoot country. Number 1. Dear TB, I actually have a story that happened in the late 1970s. I was a teenager, and what happened was I was coming home in a car with my boyfriend, and it was late at night. We were coming home from a party, and we were on a deserted country road, all cattails and shrubs on the backside of a lake. There were a couple of farms out there, but nothing on the stretch of road that we were on. And there were a lot of bends in the road, so we couldn't go very fast. We came around a sharp bend in the road, and standing right there was this huge creature. It had to have been around 8 feet tall, very hairy. I didn't know what a Bigfoot was then. I didn't know what to make of it. I thought maybe it was part human and part ape, and then I thought it was maybe somebody in a costume or something. I was terrified. I remember my boyfriend yelling, "Lock the doors! Lock the doors!" We had those manual locks, and I was able to quickly lock my door, but I couldn't turn around. I was too scared to turn around and lock that backseat door. I was simply frozen because of this creature. And we were going around 45 miles per hour because, again, you had to go slow for fear of these curves. This creature was right next to my window, running along the car at that speed, keeping up just fine, and actually trying to open the door. Luckily, he couldn't. Finally, the road straightened out, and we were able to accelerate and lose him. When we accelerated, we just tore out of there. We were both so frightened it was like a nightmare, and something I'll never forget. When we got home, I was sharing that story with my family, and my sister was all like, "It's a Bigfoot, it's a Bigfoot." I had never even thought of a Bigfoot. I was just thinking, what is this thing? It simply ran out of the woods and started racing after the car. I was too afraid when we first approached it and came in contact with it, and when the car slowed down on the curb next to it, when it was standing there, it was eye to eye with us. After that, it was just a race to get out of there, and I was too scared to even turn around and lock that back door. I can't believe it was right next to the car, running along a couple of feet from it, trying to get to the door handle, and my boyfriend was screaming, "We gotta get out of here." You just never think you're gonna see something like that. Thanks for reading. Signed, Shirley. Number 2.
I have a short Bigfoot experience that I'd like to share. We had our encounter in northern Minnesota near the Canadian-U.S. border on the night of July 14th, 2023. My boyfriend and I were coming back from work, and it's a pretty dead 2-lane road. There's never really much traffic, so we were just driving slow and talking to each other about work. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw what I thought might be a bear. So I told my boyfriend, "Hey, look, a bear." We were only going about 45 miles an hour, so he looked over, but then he got kind of a weird face, and he told me, "That doesn't look like a bear. If it is, that's one hell of an ugly bear." We both started laughing and drove off. Later, as we were almost home, we noticed that the ugly bear had been following our car. We were now doing about 55 miles an hour, and it was easily following at about 10 feet behind us. I got really worried because we had to turn up ahead, which meant that we had to slow down and that bear could easily get to our car. I was terrified. I told my boyfriend to take a sharp turn and just pray we didn't go into the river. We didn't, and we're now on the gravel road to our place, and the bear was gone. We made it home and went inside, and then we went to the bedroom to watch television. It was about 2 hours later I went outside to grab my keys because we left them out in the car. While I was near the car, I can hear something just to the left of me behind the house. We do have a lot of wildlife out here, so it really didn't scare me, but the animal did sound big. I thought maybe it was a bear, so I hurried inside. When I got inside, I found my boyfriend wide-eyed, and he told me I just saw a Bigfoot. Now, let me say that he does not believe in cryptids. He's always teasing me about my interest in aliens, so I believed him. Especially when he actually started to tear up. He was that terrified. He was so scared, and I didn't know what to do. I told him to go in the bedroom and lie down and turn his favorite movie on while I go lock the doors. As I looked out the front door while locking it up, there it was, standing right there in the tree line, looking at me. It could see me for sure, because the lights were turned on and everything. I pretended I didn't see it, but when I looked again, it was gone. My boyfriend and I have not seen it since that day. If you use this, let me know. I'd like to hear what your listeners think about it. I did post it in an online Sasquatch forum as well, but I really didn't get a lot of feedback or insight. And I know you read Bigfoot stories and get a lot of comments. Thanks. Signed, Tina.
Number 3. Dear TB, my dad in 1978 was a Portland, Oregon policeman for 30 years. And once a year I went with him while he did his police work, for a book report at school or something. I was around 12. He worked the graveyard shift, coming home at 4 in the morning, about 7 miles north of Hubbard, Oregon. We lived down a gravel road, about a mile from a school. It was all gravel, but it was long enough for 2 cars to go past each other. And we were just, half asleep but awake. That's when he and I both saw something leap across the road, as if it had already been running. It jumped the entire road, which was at least 10 feet wide. It didn't even step into the middle. It jumped off the edge of the ditch and right into the orchard next to where we lived. I looked at my dad and he looked at me. He was a very quiet man, but he just said, "What was that about?" We got to the house and parked the car in the driveway, and we were both running, trying to get through the door just as fast as we could. When I went to bed that night, I felt like it was morning because I was so anxious. I told my sister that we're moving my bunk beds to the far wall, away from the window. Afterwards, I didn't talk to anyone except my mom, and I didn't have any close friends when school was out, but then it happened again. A week later, a doctor in his small red Volkswagen drove down the same road towards town. He saw the same thing and was so scared that he stopped at the police station. Of course, he got out and it was written up in the paper and all that. It looked just like the Patterson one, referring to the Bigfoot creature filmed by Roger Patterson, except that it had lighter hair. Thanks for reading. Signed, Paul. Number 4. Hey Tattooed, I visit your channel regularly, and I've enjoyed the personal stories of your listeners. I had an experience when I was a boy that I'd like to share. You see, back in September 1978, I lived with my father on a farm in the vicinity of Shawano, Wisconsin, which is very near the Menominee Indian Reservation. There had been some buzz within the community about an unknown and large hairy creature spotted by 2 deer hunters not too far from our farm. I'd heard stories of the Menominee Walk or the Giants from stories told by the Menominee, but I just considered these tales to be simply legends. Then one evening, my father and I were coming home from the store and noticed what appeared to be 2 hairy creatures collecting squash from our garden. Each creature was at least 6 feet tall. It was dusk, but there was enough light to clearly see what they were doing. My father immediately cut the headlights and stopped the car as we just sat there and watched them as they picked and ate the squash. They didn't even seem to notice us, even though we were maybe 100 feet from them. After a few minutes, one of the creatures looked in our direction, and you could see its eyes glow red from the moonlight. We started to get scared and decided to make a dash for the house and call the police. Then suddenly, huge, disc-shaped objects appeared above us and slowly moved towards the east field, which was maybe 200 yards from us, and landed. I estimate the craft was maybe 40 feet in diameter. A large sliding door opened immediately, and a foggy green light glowed from within the craft. After a few seconds, the door closed, and the craft slowly rose and shot off towards the north. Then we noticed that the creatures were gone. A few days later, our neighbors came down the road over for dinner, and after we finished eating, my father and Mr. C walked outside. After an hour or so, the neighbors left, and I started to clean up the kitchen. Later that evening, I was watching TV in the living room, and my dad walked in, turned off the TV, and sat down beside me. He told me that Mr. C and his sister had witnessed one of the craft on the same night that we had our own encounter. They witnessed several of the large hairy creatures meandering around in the nearby woods. Mr. C said that he knew something had been in the woods for several weeks, but never got a good look until the craft had arrived. After that night, we never had another encounter, nor did we hear of more sightings by any more people in the area. Do you think that these creatures were Bigfoot, aliens, or one and the same? It has always seemed strange to me that a Bigfoot body has never been found. Is it a possibility that Bigfoot is an extraterrestrial being? Thanks. Signed, Donald. Number 5. Dear TB, back in October of 1992 in Warren County, New York, it was about 6 a.m., and I was on my way to work when something came out of the right side of the road, out of the woods, and forced me to either stop or run into it. It was dark that time of morning, so it took a few seconds to get my thoughts together. When I did, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was somewhere between 7 and 8 feet tall, at least with white or light gray hair covering it from head to toe. It was standing 10 to 12 feet in front of my car, directly in view of the headlights, so I got a perfect look of it. The creature was standing, facing the left side of the road with a slight twist in its body in my direction. We stared at each other for what seemed to be minutes, but I can't say for sure how long it was actually. I had absolutely no fear of this creature, and for whatever reason, it gave off the feeling that it had a very sad demeanor. This thing, it made no sound at all, and I don't have any reason to know whether it was male or female. Needless to say, I've carried my camera ever since, but I believe that this was a once-in-a-lifetime incident. I was alone in my car with no other witnesses. I started to tell my mom and sister at work when I arrived, but I said I think it was a bear because deep down I knew they would just think I was crazy. Many months later, I told my family, and sure enough, they called me crazy. Thanks for reading. Signed, Alan. And there it is. All I have for you tonight. A big thanks to all those that submitted their stories, and of course to Kitty, our esteemed guest narrator on Story 2. If you don't know, she is from originally Pinebox Tales, but has since moved her channel over to Pinebox Mysteries, so If you're not subscribed to her there already, I'll leave a link for you down in the pinned comment. And if you have a strange, unexplained encounter with a cryptid or maybe a brush with the supernatural or unexplained, please just send it to the email in the description and your story just might make it into a future video. Anyways, thanks again for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.